I was 14, and it was just an ordinary evening around 9 o'clock. My little cousin and I were at his house where I was babysitting him for the night. My mom and aunt were out shopping, and my dad and uncle had gone to see a movie, so it was just the two of us. We were sitting on the couch watching TV, but I couldn't shake this strange feeling that something was off. It wasn't anything I could place, just a sense that something wasn't right. The uneasy feeling lingered, gnawing at me. Finally, I got up and walked to the back door, making sure it was locked. As I came back through the kitchen, I caught sight of something in the window that made my heart skip a beat. There, in the dim light outside, was a man. Unkempt, with worn clothes and a haunting expression. He looked rough, like someone who hadn't had a safe place to sleep in a long time. And he was staring, intently, at my little cousin through the glass. A chill ran down my spine, and every protective instinct I had kicked into high gear. I knew I had to act quickly, but I didn't want to alarm my cousin. I pretended I hadn't seen the man and calmly told him, "Hey, we should go upstairs. Your parents will be home soon, and they probably wouldn't want you staying up late." He didn't argue, so we went upstairs, and I tucked him into bed, all the while feeling the weight of that strange man's gaze lingering in my mind. After making sure my cousin was settled, I quietly headed back downstairs. I didn't know if the man was still outside, but I wasn't about to take any chances. In the kitchen, I found a heavy meat tenderizer, one of those hammers with spikes on one side. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my hand, and glanced back at the window where I'd seen the man, but now he was gone. Heart pounding, I quickly checked the front door, making sure both the deadbolt and the knob were securely locked. Then, I ran back upstairs with the meat tenderizer, quietly slipping into my cousin's room. I positioned myself by the door, sitting down to keep watch. My cousin looked at me curiously and asked what I was doing. "It's nothing," I whispered. "Just keep your head down, okay?" He nodded, sensing that something was serious, and pulled the covers over himself. Taking a deep breath, I dialed the police. They said they'd send someone right away, but it would be at least 30 minutes before they arrived. After that, I called my dad and uncle, but they were still 45 minutes out. I was on my own. Then I heard it. A window shattering downstairs, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy boots stepping into the house. I felt my heart race, and I whispered to my cousin to stay calm, to hide under the covers, and to keep perfectly silent. From where I was, I could hear the stranger moving around downstairs, each heavy footstep echoing through the quiet house. My hands were clammy as I gripped the meat tenderizer tighter, every nerve on high alert. After a few agonizing minutes, I heard the boots on the stairs. Each creak brought him closer, and I knew he was just a few feet away from the door to my cousin's room. He moved slowly, stopping to open the doors to my aunt and uncle's bedroom, then the bathroom. My breath caught, my pulse pounding in my ears, but then I heard his footsteps moving back down the stairs. There was a tense silence before I heard the door to the basement open. I stayed there, clutching the meat tenderizer, my body rigid with fear. Each second felt like an eternity. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime but was probably only about 15 minutes, I heard the police arriving. They burst into the house, and I could hear the commotion as they searched the place. Later, the police told us that the man had escaped from a mental hospital in a province over. He'd been wandering for days, looking for a place to hide. The realization sent another shiver down my spine. That night, I held on to my cousin a little tighter, grateful that somehow we both made it through safely. It was a quiet, late night in my apartment, and I had drifted off into a deep sleep, wrapped in the kind of stillness that makes everything feel safe. But then, in the hazy moments between sleep and wakefulness, I heard the faint sound of my front door opening. I didn't open my eyes, though. My mind registered it as my sister. She and her boyfriend had been having issues lately, and on the nights they argued, she often showed up to crash on my couch. She had the only spare key, so it was almost like a routine at this point. I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps and some light clinking from the kitchen. It sounded just like her, the way she'd quietly settle in, maybe grab a glass of water or a quick snack before curling up on the couch. Feeling reassured, I drifted back into sleep, comforted by the familiar sounds. When my alarm went off the next morning at 5 a.m., I woke up expecting to see her sprawled out on the couch. But as I walked through the apartment, I found it empty. The blanket I usually left out for her was still neatly folded, and the couch cushions hadn't been touched. My sister wasn't there. A strange feeling prickled in the back of my mind. It was early, but I figured I'd send her a quick text. "Hey, did you come over last night?" I waited, expecting a quick, "Yeah," or maybe an, "I left early." Instead, her reply came a few minutes later. "Nope, didn't come over." I stared at the message, a chill running through me. If she hadn't been here, then who had I heard? I walked through the apartment, replaying the sounds from last night in my mind. Every step I took made me feel more uneasy. I double-checked the front door, locked just as I'd left it. But as I turned toward the door leading to the small back patio, the one I almost never used, my breath caught. It was unlocked. That door was always locked. A flurry of questions ran through my mind. Had I been careless and left it open? Or had someone unlocked it from the inside? The realization sent a wave of cold dread washing over me. Whoever had come into my apartment the night before had used that back door to leave. Someone had been inside, moving through my home while I was sleeping, completely unaware. I tried to piece together what might have happened. I'd heard someone moving around, heard them in the kitchen, but why? Nothing seemed out of place. There were no signs of a struggle, no missing items, no evidence that anyone had taken anything. It was as if they'd come in, lingered for a while, and then left, leaving behind only the eerie memory of their presence. Unable to shake the feeling, I decided to call the building management. They checked the security footage and confirmed what I dreaded to hear. A figure had indeed entered the building late at night, someone the cameras had never recorded before. The person seemed to know the layout, navigating the hallways smoothly, slipping in and out as if it was the most natural thing in the world. That day, I changed my locks, added extra security, and made sure every door and window was secured. But the unease lingered. That night, the comfort of sleep didn't come as easily, and every sound seemed amplified. Every creak and whisper, a reminder that someone had been there in the dark, wandering through my space. The thought that they could return someday still sends a chill down my spine. I'm careful now, always locking up, always double-checking. Because now, I know what it's like to wake up in a safe place that suddenly doesn't feel so safe anymore. As a kid, I had a rebellious streak, and it showed itself on the day of a family friend's funeral. My parents had insisted I come, but I was stubborn, finding any excuse to stay home. It didn't go over well with them, and they left the house with frustration clear in their voices. But once they were gone, I felt a thrill of independence, and with the house to myself, I settled in to play GTA 4 on the console, ready for a peaceful afternoon. About an hour went by, and I was completely immersed in the game. But suddenly a soft, faint knock at the front door pulled me out of the game. I paused, glanced toward the door, but shrugged it off, assuming it was just a neighbor or maybe a sound from outside. No one was supposed to be visiting after all. A few minutes later, just as I was about to get back into my game, I heard it again. A louder, more desperate knock, as if someone were genuinely in need of help. It startled me, and I could feel my heart rate pick up a little. I got up, curiosity mingling with a faint hint of unease, and went over to the window near the door to get a better look outside. But the yard was empty, not a single person in sight. Still, something didn't sit right with me. I opened the door cautiously, half expecting someone to jump out as a prank, but the porch was completely empty. Just as I was about to close it, I noticed something unusual at the edge of the yard. There, standing still on the other side of the fence, was a large pitch-black German Shepherd, watching me with an intense, unblinking gaze. A shiver ran down my spine. I'd never seen this dog around the neighborhood, and it seemed oddly focused, not barking or moving, just watching. But I brushed it off, trying to convince myself that maybe it was just a stray, or perhaps it belonged to someone nearby. I closed the door and went back to my game, though my mind was restless now, and every little sound seemed amplified. 10 minutes passed, and I was just starting to relax when a sudden loud banging shattered the silence. It wasn't just a knock this time. It was a relentless pounding, almost like someone was kicking the door. My pulse quickened, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. This wasn't normal. Fear began to creep in, and I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I ran to my parents' bedroom, remembering where my dad kept his handgun. My hands shook as I took it, gripping it tightly as I crept toward the window again to get another look outside. What I saw froze me in place. The German Shepherd was no longer on the other side of the fence. Somehow it had crossed over and was now standing directly in front of my door, staring at it with that same unnerving intensity. Its eyes were fixed, almost as if it knew I was watching. I couldn't tear my eyes away, feeling utterly trapped in that moment, uncertain what the dog wanted or if someone else was lurking nearby. All I knew was that I was alone, with only a locked door between me and this strange visitor. Eventually, the knocking and banging stopped, and slowly, after what felt like an eternity, the German Shepherd turned and trotted off, disappearing around the corner of the fence. I didn't let my guard down, though. I waited in tense silence, every creak of the house making me jump. When my parents finally returned, I told them everything, hoping they'd take my fear seriously. But they brushed it off, blaming the story on my overactive imagination. I didn't push it, but that night I was certain that I'd never stay home alone again. Years later, at a family gathering, I decided to bring up the story to my dad, expecting maybe a few laughs over my childhood fear. But to my surprise, he started chuckling, then full-on cackling, as he recalled the day. He explained between laughs that it had all been a setup he'd arranged with a friend to scare me for skipping out on the funeral. Apparently, his friend had knocked, hid, and even brought his German Shepherd along to make the whole experience more eerie. I was pissed, to be honest. The whole event was genuinely traumatizing,